Hello, everyone. I hope you had a good break. We are back now in the two different tracks. And for this track, we will be opening as a follow-up of the topics we were already covering yesterday, but we'll continue to a higher level with a talk from Valliappan Narayanan, which is unlocking the power of LLM, harnessing the potential of an API gateway for large language models. Hello, Valliappan. How are you?
Good. How are you? Hi, everyone.
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. You told me you have a lot to cover, so I'll let you maximum time for that. Thank you.
Awesome. Can I start presenting?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Do you all see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen. Everything is good.
Awesome. Yeah. As Maidi mentioned, I'm Valli. I'm engineering lead at AT&T. So I think large language models has been the talk of the town recent days, and we all kind of use GPT or some other models and directly use their APIs. But today I'm gonna cover from the enterprise standpoint. So what are the guardrails and what are the gateways that you have to put on top of the existing APIs like OpenAI APIs in order to power the large language models to your enterprise use cases. So when you have multiple teams in your organization working on different use cases, at some point you want to build the API on top of the existing large language models. Either it could be Azure or it could be OpenAI directly to take care of some of the things which we're going to talk about in the rest of the presentation. Okay, so why do we need an API gateway and what are its benefits? So we need API gateway for a few reasons, as you can see. So I just quickly go over. We are going to talk about this in detail, but I'll just quickly go over why do we need API gateway. So so API gateway is actually a stack that helps with orchestrating with different APIs and write security performance on top of it to maximize the potential of the API. And some of the things that we're going to discuss and why we need API gateways are some of the security reasons, performance optimizations, cost optimization, error handling, monitoring, and how do we integrate with different systems? How do LLM APIs integrate with different systems? And how can we incorporate some of the ethical and responsible strategies of the organization with that gateway? So with that, I'll go into the first one, the security considerations. So definitely security is one of the top priorities when we try to use a technology like this, especially a new technology like this, and when we have a lot of talks around going on LLMs like hallucinations, etc. So security is a top priority. So our job is actually to protect against the malicious users, like data privacy, etc. So one of the things that you could do in your API gateway is implement authentication and authorization mechanisms in order to give access to who can access the APIs and who can access the LLMs and how they can access it. And you can also incorporate things like compliance and some of the governance, like the compliance and governance your compliance and governance teams comes up with. You can incorporate those things in your API gateway so that gets propagated to all of the use cases. So you implement these security, compliance, governance in one place, which can be utilized by everyone in the company when they use your API gateway. And definitely you can put put considerations around intellectual property rights and then privacy, etc. So those all can be incorporated. It can also be a centralized point for the client requests, and then allowing for consistent access, and then security policies can also be incorporated here. So that's one of the good things about having an API gateway on top of the LLM APIs. So the next one is the performance optimization. This is also a very important one actually when developing against the LLMs or the API gateway. So we could have a caching mechanisms for frequently used requests, especially when you are doing search, semantic search, you could use some caching mechanisms so that you don't go to the source all the time. And then you could do things like request batching, and then response caching, load balancing, etc. So those are some of the things that you could do in your API gateway on top of the LLM. And then you could distribute requests to multiple instances, like the usual load balancing, whatever you do with the traditional applications. This helps in this mainly helps in maintaining responsiveness and scalability, even through the times of high traffic and increased demand. So the next one that we're going to talk about is actually cost optimization. So it's one of the important topics, right? So we all know LLMs are very expensive. So it's definitely important to stay in the budget, etc. So some of the things that I have seen it working is using multiple models, not just the most expensive model. For example, if you're using GPT, OpenAI has multiple models, not just DaVinci, the most expensive one. They have other ones. So you could use different models for different use cases. For example, for certain use cases, I have been using the least expensive model. But for other use cases, important use cases, I've been using most expensive model. So I choose the model based on the use case and its importance. So you could configure all this in your API gateway, saying probably for summarization, you could use least expensive models, but for customer support, you could use most expensive models, etc. So the next one is this is one of the important things on any API gateway, not just API gateways on top of LLMs, like error handling and resilience. We should define a proper error codes, retry mechanisms, circuit breaker mechanisms, and fault tolerance to ensure we have a very good robustness. And then we have very good reliability in terms of when there is a potential failures or disruptions. So the good thing about it is, let's say if you have multiple teams in your organization working on different use cases, you could incorporate all this logic in the API gateway, which serves as the gate for all these use cases. So all of them will get benefited if you incorporate what the things that we are talking about, like the security, the performance, the cost optimization, the error handling. So that every team doesn't have to go through all this, and they have enough freedom and peace of mind to actually work on the actual use case and not work on things like error handling, resilience, etc. So that's I think we are at the halfway point, but I hope it has given you some idea about why do we need an API gateway and what are some of its benefits. But there are a few more things that explains why do we need an API gateway as well, which we're going to cover. So another most important point is the monitoring, right? So if there are different teams in an organization working on use cases, at some point they want to monitor how is it performing, are the answers right, how are we doing in terms of hallucination, misinformation, etc. So the idea is to actually implement monitoring in one place, that is in the API gateway, where the teams can come and utilize it. I'll give an example. So one of the things that worked for me in the past is we used Power BI actually to visualize how many requests a particular use case is making, what are its response times, what are its token size, etc. So we group the projects by the use cases, and then every use case when I say use case, every team have their own implementation of LLM and why they use it. So they can go and visualize how much calls are they making, how many failures, success, tokens are they utilizing, what models are they utilizing. So it can be not just a Power BI, it can be connected to any visualization tools like Google Studio, things like that. So they get a nice view of how are they performing, where they are lacking, what are some of the optimizations that they could do, and then how they do a better resource utilization, etc. And we could definitely do some analytics on top of it, and then it helps in the overall system performance and the reliability. And then it also helps organizations to track the usage, and then it helps with cost optimization as well. So the next one is actually, it's also one of the important topics when we use LLMs, the ethical and ethics and the responsibility. So like the organizations has different teams like legal, privacy. They have their own way of how the things should look like, how the brand should look like. Are we giving the right responses? Um, like, are we staying within the limits, etc.? So you could incorporate all this ethical considerations into the API gateway that get propagated to all the use cases in your organization, or if you have multiple use cases. And then the other thing that you could do is actually like bias mitigation. Like if there is any bias in the model, you could actually uh, do all that in the API gateway. Again, that gets propagated to all the use cases. Like the fairness, I mean the transparency of it, you could visualize how the responses actually derived from, and the what data is being used for training, etc. So this is basically to be more responsible, like having the responsibility of using the model, like technology like this, and then also to avoid potential negative impacts on any individuals or communities. So, I mean, I highly suggest we incorporate some of these into the API gateway so it can be useful for anyone who is actually using it. And the next one is the integration of the existing system. So in your organization, like there could be multiple systems, and we have this new system that is LLM. So we also need to worry about how are we gonna integrate this LLM with other systems, like how the data gonna look like, the compatibility of the data, the how it's gonna synchronize, how are we gonna version it, and then like how are we going to maintain the system's integrity. So like the data flow getting into like your uh, ETL or your data storage, etc., or data lake. So we also have to think about how do we integrate with other systems, and implementing these things at the API gateway can be helpful so that the use cases, the people who are working on use cases doesn't have to really focus on doing this. Rather, the API gateway, if there's a separate team for API gateway, can work on this. The application team, the product teams can actually utilize that. So that's the end of like the different needs and the benefits of the API gateway when using an LLM. But the point is actually you may not need this API gateway if you are just implementing one use case, and that's all you're gonna do in the future, because you will be incorporating this API gateway into your stack automatically. But if you have multiple use cases in your organization, then it is a good idea to implement a API gateway so that all of these things that we have discussed, the 7 things that we have discussed, can be bundled and implemented on this gateway that can be utilized by others. I mean, that's the end of it, but I'm happy to jump into any particular topic or questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Valliappan. So one question about security. Yesterday we had some people from the OWASP LLM security, who are talking about like prompt injection, or all these new security, let's say, or hallucination injection or stuff like that. Like how today is it on the API gateway level that you should consider these new security layers?
Yes, I think it would be very beneficial if you implement this at the API gateway level, right? So imagine if you are working on multiple use cases. So if the gateway team can implement this, the platform team can implement this, everybody can inherit this actually. So highly suggest to implement this at the API gateway level.
There's also a question about rate limiting. That because actually 2 questions on rate limiting. The first one is mostly about the fact that the LLM may be used by your own end users who would prefer the LLM integration or ChatGPT plugin or whatever LLM plugin versus getting to your APIs directly. So how should you consider authorization or rate counting when the LLM is actually a proxy for your own users to consume your APIs?
Sure. So I would start simple, like using the traditional rate limiting, and don't get too fancy about it. And then like you can queue request to start with, and then yeah, I mean the traditional rate limiting would work actually.
Okay, there's a question about temperature. LLM, just for everyone, but LLM can, when they generate text or pictures or content, you can have a temperature between 0 to 1. And the higher the temperature is, the more you allow to generate things. And so maybe to have to be more creative. But so the question is mostly when you imagine like government authorities, APIs, or like a trusted source of information, do you know any possibility to limit the usage by too high temperature LLMs? Say only if the prompt is temperature below, I don't know, 0.3, I allow the request to pass. Do you know anything like that, or it's not implemented yet?
No, certainly you can do that, but it really depends on the use case. I'll give you an example. So if the use case is around content creation, like a blog content creation, you have to be more creative, right? The temperature has to be like probably more than 0.5. But if the use case is like customer service, right? So you don't want to be creative in customer service. You have to present the facts. So you have to limit that to like 0.2 or something like that. So I would leave that responsibility to the person who actually is responsible for the use case, but not by the API gateway team actually, right? Like
Okay.
they should have a responsibility of what temperature they want to set to get better results because it's their use case.
So like a temperature access management, like or something like
Yeah.
that, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, just
Yeah, but you could limit the temperature. Nobody's going to stop you because you are the one having a gateway before the request reaches LLM. You could limit, but I seriously doubt like whoever is creating the use case has to really aware of that and control that. Not really like having the LLM put the guardrails on like don't go above 0.5 or things like that. But you could do that like in API gateway, set the temperature or to limit the temperature.
we have a question about the open source aspect. Today, do you consider all open source gateways can actually be a good fit for LLM, or there are only a small selection of them?
Sure. I mean, we have developed our own gateway. Like, we haven't found any gateway that really works with the LLM use cases. Maybe it's too early. We haven't seen that. But definitely, I think taking the existing open source gateway could be a good place to start, actually. Yeah. Like, especially with rate limiting, authorization. Yeah, any rate limiting open source would work.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Valliappan. This is all the question we had. Thank you very much. And again, we'd love to have you maybe in an in-person conference in the Bay Area or in New York area when we go there.